So I've been debating on making this video for a while, and I'm sure throughout a lot of this, many of you folks will either be nodding in agreement, calling me an idiot, or really confused. Because what we're talking about is Nintendo. Switch in particular this case, but Nintendo on the whole. And why I'm just really tired of Nintendo and Switch being treated by AAA third-party companies, and yes, I mean all of them, not just Western, Japanese as well, being treated as more of an afterthought, a side project, not really a console or a console manufacturer that's on par with everybody else. Now, before I get into what's happening with Switch today and my feelings on this and why I'm sick of it, I do want to point out that Nintendo is primarily to blame for driving third parties away over the prior decades in the business. Back in the 80s, Nintendo had to create some strict rules, basically, that Nintendo seal of quality that required Nintendo to approve of every game coming out on their platform, because the reason the video game industry crashed in the 80s was because there was no regulations on the games themselves. And I'm not just talking about like ESRB ratings and stuff like that. That kind of came a little later. I'm more so talking about the fact that store shelves were being flooded with shovelware, making it impossible to find good games. So when you buy an Atari 2600 and everything you buy for it ends up sucking, you quickly kind of become irrelevant. And that's what was happening to the video game industry until Nintendo came along. Not only did Nintendo pump out and promote their first party and second party, IPs in front of other companies and happen to have high quality ones, they also made sure that the third party offerings were generally really good. That doesn't mean there aren't terrible NES games. There are. But if you look at the amount of shovelware on NES compared to the systems that came before it, it's actually a night and day difference. And Nintendo kept this Nintendo seal quality going into the Super Nintendo, and then they still kept it going in subsequent years after. And why did they do that? It sounds like a wholly good thing, right, to have that Nintendo seal of quality, but the thing is, as the industry bounced back and as competition was ramping up with Sega and then eventually Sony and Microsoft and all these companies, is that they were offering more creative freedom. Because when you have to have everything go through a manual approval process, Nintendo could essentially say no to a game or censor games coming to their platform. And there actually are several instances in decades past where Nintendo not just censored their own games, censored third-party games as well on their platform, providing you what was not the original experience. And so that was just, it was irksome. And this is before we get into Nintendo's other decisions, where Sony started going with CDs and then eventually DVDs and Blu-rays. Nintendo stuck with cartridges for an extra generation longer than they needed to, and that made it more expensive to put games on a platform like the Nintendo 64. And then there's the architecture thing where they stuck with PowerPC longer than they should have, when other companies like Microsoft were obviously always kind of leaning towards PC stuff. And then obviously Sony made a mistake as well with the PlayStation 3 with how they handled their hardware, but then they bounced back this current generation. And Nintendo's just always made decisions that seem to drive third parties away. Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and then you have Wii. Motion controls are great. Third-party support on Wii was actually a lot stronger than people realize, to be completely honest. But it still wasn't on par with everybody else for several obvious reasons, from power differences to disc differences to not even having a system that can output in even 720p, let alone HD. I think 480p was the highest you could get a Wii to output. But whatever. Nintendo always had a really strong handheld business that was always, I don't want to say it was always on the side, because their handheld business has actually always been their most profitable and highest selling business they've ever had, but it was always kind of an aside. And then Wii U with the gamepad and blah, 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 you get up to today with Switch. Now, the thing is a lot of Nintendo seal of quality requirements are gone. Nintendo no longer requires that they have to approve of your game coming to the platform. They do still have an approval process for releasing patches for games on Switch. That's a little bit of a hassle compared to other companies, but I feel like that's more so to block exploits, because sometimes you guys will know certain exploits and certain hacks on systems happen through third-party games that had just an issue in the code that allowed it to occur. So I think it's a security reason, and I don't really think that's why games aren't coming out on Switch. It is why patches take longer for certain games on Switch. NBA Playgrounds, infamously last year, had a hard time getting things patched because they had to wait for the Nintendo approval process on it. But they didn't have to have Nintendo's approval to come to the platform. All they had to do was request a dev kit. Nintendo basically gives any person who's trying to make a game a dev kit. You pay for them, so it's not that big of a deal. I could have a dev kit. If I contact Nintendo and I have a game and a preliminary concept for a game, and I can buy a dev kit from Nintendo if I want. There's certain NDAs that come with that, and just because I have a dev kit doesn't mean I can talk about the dev kit or give you any information on the dev kit until the NDA has run its course in 10 years or whatever. But the reason I'm bringing all this up is because this is all the stuff that's basically Nintendo's fault for why third parties kind of drifted away from them. The power differences, the trying unique things with controllers, the Nintendo seal of quality that they held on to too long, the different mediums between discs and cartridges. And even today on Switch, a cartridge is actually a nice deterrent for a third party because it's more expensive to use cartridges. Now, does it matter as much when we're in a medium where Nintendo is just fine if you release games digital only? I mean, NBA 2K18 last year initially released digital only. It took a month before there was a physical copy. So I don't know if that's a deterrent these days, but it is something to take into consideration when releasing games on a Nintendo platform. Now, that's where I kind of give Nintendo their bulk of the blame. There's a lot of other stuff that happened in between that Nintendo did to kind of push away third parties, but that's kind of the general gist of Nintendo's faults they have made over the years and not adjusting to the industry quick enough to encourage third-party success on their platforms. There's a lot of reasons that people basically think you buy a Nintendo system to play Nintendo games. And that's even still true to this day. I know a lot of people told me, they're only interested in Pokemon Let's Go the rest of the year, or they're only interested in Smash, which means they have zero interest in the oodles of other games coming out this year, like Starlink and Octopath Traveler, Wolfenstein II, and Crash Insane Trilogy this week. There's other quality games coming out that aren't from Nintendo, but that's neither here nor there. Now, let's get into the bulk of this conversation. I play on multiple platforms. Own an Xbox One, want to get an Xbox One X, want to get a PlayStation 4 Pro. I have a gaming PC, a 4K capable gaming PC, so I do get to play games near the best of the best. I don't have quite a 1080 Ti in my system, but I could play, I have dual 4K monitors, and I enjoy my 4K gaming. Let me put it that way. I got a 4K gaming TV, all that stuff. I have a gaming-capable laptop. Granted, the specs in the laptop are more for video editing, but I can game on it. 1080p gaming at like 120 FPS or something. That's great. And then I have Switch, and Switch is my primary gaming platform. And I want every game in the world to come to Switch. I understand console-exclusive games are not going to come to Switch, and I understand, as of today, right now in 2018, on June 27th when I'm recording this, that we're not going to get full third-party support. And I just want to say that as a Nintendo fan, as a gaming fan, I am sick and tired of the excuses. I am sick and tired of the treatment of a Nintendo platform that is probably close to 20 million units strong at this point, might sell 100 million units over the course of its life, not getting full AAA support. Now, there's a lot of arguments on why this doesn't happen. Most recently, Capcom said that Monster Hunter World can't come to Switch. There's two ways to determine why Monster Hunter World can't come to Switch. One, Switch doesn't have the hardware capable of running it, and two, there's a contract in place that blocks Switch from even being in consideration. We don't know which it is. We do know that Capcom said they are going to make a new Monster Hunter game for Switch. We're not sure if it's going to be exclusive. It very well could be exclusive. They have had success with Nintendo in recent years doing that, so we'll have to wait and see. Either way, it's going to get a new Monster Hunter game that's not just Double Cross from the 3DS. However, the thing is we hear that, right? Think of all the praise going up from Bethesda. Bethesda brought us a late port of Doom, which, of course, it was late because the Switch wasn't even out yet, and now they're bringing us a late port of Wolfenstein II. But we're not getting Rage 2. We're not getting Fallout 76. We got Fallout Shelter, of course. But we're not getting the latest and greatest from Bethesda. Why is this? Why is that the case? A lot of people are going to come out of the woodworks, like they've done with Fallout 76 since I started talking about it, and tell you, these are online games, as if that matters. The Switch has online. I literally just got done playing like 4 different games today online on Switch, so I don't really know why that matters. Anyways, and they'll come out and they'll tell you that the Switch does not have the hardware capable of running these games. I want to debunk something right now when it comes to that, and this is speaking from a little bit of personal experience. I don't know, many of you guys might not know this. I'm in college for a game design degree. So this means I deal with a lot of game programming. I deal with game engines. My best friend in the world, Eric, he also has degrees in game development. He's not currently working a game development job, but whatever. I've also worked in game testing in the past. I can't really talk a lot about that because I'm still under NDAs they're basically lifetime NDAs about a game that hasn't even come out yet. Maybe if it comes out, I'll have to recheck my contract there and see if I can talk about it. But I've worked on games. I'm not going to say I'm like this big AAA developer and that I have oodles and oodles of experience or that I have a game you can go out and buy right now that I've worked on. But what I can tell you is that I've dabbled in game development. I have been in school for a little while, and I understand a bit more of it now than I did, 10 years ago. But here's the thing. Every single game, yes, I literally mean every single game, whether it's Call of Duty, Black Ops 4, whether it's Battlefield 2, whether it is the new, Battlefront 2 Star Wars game or the new Star Wars game that was kind of sort of announced but not shown off yet, whether or not it is really anything, Rage 2, Beyond Good and Evil 2, whatever the case may be, regardless of what game it is, all of them can run on Switch. There is no doubt in my mind all of it can run on Switch. And let me explain why. The primary reason for something to be incompatible to run on a piece of hardware isn't about how fast the CPU is, how fast the GPU is, how much RAM there is, or all of that. It's more so to do with architecture. Basically, if you built a game that supports something like, say, DirectX 12 on PC, and everything you built around the game is built around the abilities of DirectX 12, any older architecture that doesn't support DirectX 12 cannot really run that game unless they build a second version of that game that runs on an older version of DirectX. And a lot of companies don't want to do that. It's not cost efficient to do that. Now, on PC, it does actually happen more often than you think, but I'm just saying when you put this at the console level, especially where PlayStation 4 and Xbox One are much closer to PCs than video game consoles have really ever been before, it is very interesting to look at how game development works on them. And here's the thing. The Tegra X1 inside of Switch is using modern architecture that is 100% compatible with x64 and x86. There's a lot of technicality stuff in this, and you guys can go do some research into it if you want. You don't have to take my word for it. All the research is out there. All the benchmarks are out there. All the information is out there and fully publicly available on the Tegra X1. So if you want to call me out on it, go for it, but I've done the research. So the thing is, architecture-wise, the system can run all of these games. What prevents these games from coming to Switch is essentially one of, I feel like, maybe three things. One, it does cost money to port the game. If you don't think sales of a game on the platform are going to justify whatever it's going to cost to port the game to the platform, you're just not going to port the game. Now, for us as gamers, we view it as, well, if you can make your money back on porting the game to the platform, then you should port the game to the platform because you break even. It's a non-risk. You don't lose any money. Or if you're guaranteed to make some profits, you should bring the game over. But see, companies want all of the profits. They don't want some profits. Like bringing Madden over to Switch could be a highly profitable venture, but it won't be as profitable as it is on Xbox One, PC, and PlayStation 4. So they want all of the profits. They don't want some of the profits. So that's one aspect of it. Has to deal with the money. The other aspect has to deal with creative vision. And creative vision is basically, we have a certain way we want everyone who plays, say, Beyond Good and Evil 2 to experience it, right? They want every person to experience it in 1440p or above, at 60 FPS or above, with these high-quality physics and particle effects and lighting and shaders and all. We want them to experience everything in that, and we just do not want to dumb it down for something like Switch. And dumb it down isn't really a good terminology, but I'm trying to use it as a way to understand how a game like that could run on Switch. All these games can run on Switch. They might run at sub HD, especially in handheld mode. They might be running only at 30 FPS instead of 60, sometimes sub 30 FPS like Doom and Wolfenstein do. They might be having blockier things and no anti-aliasing, and maybe no, like in Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, they basically got rid of all the fur, like the individual hair fur textures, and kind of gave you more flat texture-based things. but the games still run. And they could still bring these games there and run them on the platform. But there's that creative vision inside them that says, that's not how we envision the game, so we don't want anyone to experience those games in that light. Basically, we don't want anyone running the game on low settings on PC, so we're going to make low settings on PC basically be a $2,000 computer. I'm not saying that's the case for Xbox One and PlayStation 4, but you kind of catch my drift. It's where their bottom end of what they want this game to look like, the Switch is below that. So that's another reason. The other reason is that they just don't like Nintendo. I mean, let's just throw that out there. EA, as an example, is not a fan of Nintendo in terms of being a platform maker because EA has never really made bank on Nintendo since the 90s. So EA doesn't make a lot of money from Nintendo. We can argue about why that's the case. So they just don't like Nintendo. That unprecedented partnership on Wii U really turned into a bunch of nothing. We got some decent support in the first 6 months, and that was it. And all those games were probably already committed and contractually guaranteed when that partnership was formed, because you notice how there was no other EA games coming out after the initial games they already announced. So my thought here is, as a Nintendo fan, is that third-party companies care more about themselves and more about their pride than they do about gamers. And I'm not saying that as individual developers, as one who's working to become one, very much care about the product. They care about the end user experience. But I am tired of these excuses. I think you should let consumers speak for what is worthwhile. I feel like we should be getting Rage 2. I feel like we should be getting the new Assassin's Creed game. I feel like we should be getting the new Call of Duty, the new Battlefield, Anthem from EA. We should be getting all these games. And you should let the audience decide if we want to buy them. Do we want to buy Anthem at 30 FPS and sub HD at times? Let us decide as consumers. The thing is, they're taking the choice out of consumers' hands, leaving potentially millions of dollars at the table because they just don't want to try. And that is what is so frustrating. Why? The thing is, unlike some of you guys out there where Switch might be your only gaming platform, Switch isn't my only gaming platform, so I can play all these games in a zillion other places, but I want to play them on Switch because as an adult who is turning 32 years old in a week, as a parent of 3, the Switch is enabling me to dive deep into games again in a way I just don't have time to sit in front of a PC and do, time to always sit in front of my TV and do, but I do have time on commutes to things. I do have time when as an example, I just had surgery recently and I was in the hospital for hours, and guess what I got to do while I was in the hospital? Play Switch for 4 hours. I haven't had a 4-hour gaming session that wasn't review related in forever, or I guess live stream related. We had a couple live streams go that long, but you know what I'm saying, like on my own free time, because Switch enables me to do that. I don't have that time to sit in front of a TV because of my children, because I got to spend time with my fiance and I have other things going on. I have work, I have YouTube, so I want all these games on Switch, and I don't want to be disingenuous to all of the I guess arguably legit reasons that we're not getting these games, but I'm just tired of it. I have accepted that Nintendo Switch is not going to get full AAA support from anyone. And I don't care how many examples you bring up of games like Starlink or Wolfenstein 2 or Crash or Octopath Travelers. That's great. We're getting Octopath Travelers. We're not getting Kingdom Hearts 3. We're not getting Final Fantasy. We're not getting, or maybe we will end up getting Final Fantasy 15 someday. They've talked about how they're still doing it. But Square has also said they're focused on exclusive Switch games, which means they're not bringing over all their big multi-platform games. Capcom, yeah, that's great. We're getting Mega Man, but we're not getting all of their big multi-platform games. Like, we're getting scraps. We are getting games that they either aren't 100% sold on how successful it will be. I'll give you an example. Starlink Battle for Atlas, with its Toys to Life concept, has already turned some people off, and Ubisoft is probably worried if the game will be a success at all. But you know what's going to help it be a success? Star Fox on Switch probably is going to make Starlink, the best-selling version of it, end up being on Switch. It's just mind-boggling to me. And by the way, this isn't a knock on Starlink. I played Starlink like for almost an hour at E3. Oh my gosh, is that game really, really good. Hope you guys aren't turned off. But I I'm just incredibly frustrated as someone who enjoys a lot of these bigger games. I really do. I love Nintendo games. I love Octopath Travelers that's coming out. The Prologue demo was fantastic. Starlink is fantastic. I'm getting Wolfenstein II on the platform. I held out for it on Switch. I'm paying a premium to have it on Switch over other platforms, a worse version of the game. But I don't care because I'm going to actually have time to play it on Switch versus the other systems. So nothing can be done. As Player Essence has come out to say recently, port begging doesn't get us anywhere. And in general, he's basically right. Like, even when a studio says, hey, if you ask for this game, we're going to make it, they already know at the time they say that if they're going to make it or not. All they're interested to know is that there's fan demand. They kind of did that with Shenmue 3, right, with the partnership with Sony. They wanted to see how big demand was for the game, but they were still going to make it anyways, as was evident by the partnership that studio had with Sony before they even announced the Kickstarter. So, in general, port making doesn't get you anything, and there's a zillion examples you might give. Oh, a lot of people were asking for Dragon Ball FighterZ it was already coming to Switch. They've been already working on it forever, long before people were asking for it to come. So, port making isn't going to get us anywhere. I really want Madden, but what's the point of making a petition to EA to beg them to bring Madden to Switch? What's the point of doing any of that? Outside of making yourself feel good. Because obviously port begging makes yourself feel good, especially if you were begging for Dragon Ball FighterZ and now we have it, so now you feel vindicated. It's fine to feel vindicated, and I'm glad you feel good about yourself, but you personally had little to do with why they're bringing that game over. It had to do with money and them realizing that it really wasn't that expensive to bring over and it was cost efficient, and they feel like they'll at least break even or make a significant profit on Switch. That or the original games didn't sell that well. In the case of Wolfenstein II, I believe they were actually upset with the sales numbers. Bethesda doesn't usually outwardly show they're upset, but the sales numbers for Wolfenstein 2 were actually below the New Order, and by all indications, Wolfenstein 2, the new Colossus, is the better game. So maybe millions of people were holding out for the Switch version. I have no idea. I know I held out for the Switch version, but I don't know how many other people did. I just think this video might feel pointless, I guess, but Is it okay to be frustrated at this point? I mean, this has been the way it's been for decades. This isn't new, but I dream big, and I want to live in a world where Nintendo and Nintendo Switch is treated equally. And I know there's some people that will say, "Oh, just wait for 2019." No, if we don't have the support now, we're not going to get it in 2019 either. PlayStation 4 and Xbox One had AAA support day one. And I know a lot of you guys are going to talk about, oh, remember it being called Port Station? They ported this, they ported that. And at the same time, they were still getting the latest Call of Duties, the latest Assassin's Creeds. All of the latest brand new AAA games were also coming out on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One in the first year and the first holiday even. So, yes, there were a lot of ports, but there were also all the new games, and they were getting those as well. Like on Switch, yeah, we have a lot of Wii U ports, but and a lot of older ports of AAA games, we're not getting, all of the latest and greatest games. We're getting little trickles of new IPs or tests here and there, and it's just frustrating. I think the only studio, or at least the only company that's been upfront and honest is 2K. 2K gave us NBA 2K18, we're getting NBA 2K19, and we'll probably get NBA 2K20, and we'll probably get NBA 2K moving forward because there is an established fan base for the game on Switch. Probably would have got WWE 2K19 if they didn't flub up last year's version on Switch so terribly that no one bought it because the people who did buy it probably should have demanded refunds if they didn't, but is it okay to be frustrated? Because the hard thing is I grew up in the 90s. So I grew up with the NES and the SNES. Both of those platforms had full AAA support. There was not a single multi-platform AAA game, unless it was, that was PC exclusive, so that's not multi-platform. Multi-platform AAA games all came to the Nintendo systems and Sega Genesis. And even on the N64, most multi-platform AAA games came to the N64 and PlayStation. Granted, 64 is where it started the decline for Nintendo, but it's just, I'm just tired of the excuses. Here's what I want to happen. You guys know what I want to happen, but here's what I want. Instead of third parties talking around it, just say, we don't like Switch, it doesn't fit our vision, we're not going to support it. We don't like Switch, it doesn't fit our vision, we're not going to support it. I don't want scraps off the heap. So, yes, Ubisoft, Bethesda, Square Enix, everyone else, all the games you're bringing are great, but I want you to fully commit to the platform or just get the hell out of here. I'm probably the only one that feels that way, and I'm still going to be buying the games you are bringing. It's just how frustrated I am. It's frustrating to me that Switch finally provided me a platform as a parent and as an adult that allows me to game in the way that I want to game, gives me my gaming time. It gives me time to game again, and I'm still stuck without the ability to play all the games I want to play because third-party companies don't view Nintendo in the same light as they view PlayStation and Xbox One. Imagine that PlayStation 5 comes out and it's barely more powerful than the PlayStation 4 Pro, but the Xbox 2 comes out and craps all over and is 2 or 3 times more powerful. Do you dare think third parties are not going to bring all of their games to the much weaker PlayStation 5? It won't even be a question. Of course they're going to. But with Nintendo, we have to beg, we have to claw, we have to whine, we have to bitch, and even then we really don't get what we want. All right, folks. Let me know what you think about all this down in the comments below. It's a very unusual video, kind of a ranty, kind of a just letting my frustrations out. But this has just been bubbling inside of me for so long. I needed to let it out. I feel relieved. You guys go ahead and call me an idiot and everything else down in the comments below. But I'm glad to get this off of my chest. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and I'll catch you in the next one.